to teach basic computer skills in early childhood education. ICT capability goes beyond just the ability to use certain ICT techniques. It is the mix of ICT techniques, routines, concepts, processes, and higher order thinking skills that together constitute ICT capability. In this session, I will show you how to develop each component of ICT capability in your early learning environment. An example of routines would be learning how to use a tablet computer. And the conversion of ICT techniques to routines is generally left to natural processes in the course of a task set in a lesson. Children who are slower to learn these routines will make slow progress in curriculum tasks, and these children may continually need help with basic operations, such as selecting items or undoing mistakes. To help with those children who struggle with routines, you might need to give extra time to work on focused, practiced tasks. And you'll need to keep a list of up-to-date routines in relation to hardware and software available. An example of ICT techniques would be inserting a photo into a document. And when introducing new software tools and ICT techniques to children, it's important that you start by discussing what it can do, how it can be achieved, and focus on this rather than merely demonstrating a fixed sequence of ICT techniques to achieve a single outcome. Additionally, students will need to associate the actions involved in an ICT technique with the effect it achieves. So having a name for the technique and/or its effect is helpful. However, the name should not be seen as something extra to learn, but as a means of communicating and thinking about the action and its effect. This is especially so if the name is used in menu options, but it also is helpful where the movements, buttons, or shortcuts are used. ICT techniques which have not become routines may be carried out in different contexts using the affordances on the screen, such as icons or menus, or with help from adults or peers. Monitoring and intervening ICT techniques will require you to have a useful checklist for each class to enable you to keep track of which child are confident in using the ICT technique. Give students needing help only the minimum of support needed. And then this should be withdrawn as soon as possible. Finally, for techniques, you will need to encourage children to reflect on the use of ICT techniques across contexts and situations so that they are more able to generate ideas, principles, and strategies that are widely applicable. An example of processes in early childhood learning environments would be to produce a greetings card or poster. In this situation, an understanding of relevant concepts is needed to analyze a situation and identify the particular ICT techniques required to reach the desired goal. So here's what you need to do. Students will need to work on a task which is not set out step by step. This allows them to try out new ideas, and you can observe their approach and intervene when they fail to make the expected progress. Again, the minimum level of support should be given, and you'll need to structure the activity by questioning, prompting, and showing if necessary. Withdraw as much support as possible to see what the learners can achieve unaided. It is important to remember that as child's understanding of a process, such as developing a poster, using a desktop program, or modeling with a spreadsheet, cannot be represented by a checklist. It requires a description of the way in which they approach a task and the support that they need. Effective teaching requires, whenever possible, to discuss with children what it is they are doing at the process level, rather than just identifying the next ICT techniques. So you would need to draw on the relevant images and analogies where it is helpful in order that the children gain a feeling for the whole process. And they should be able to identify useful ICT techniques themselves later on. Finally, take note of a child's higher order thinking skills when they decide when it is appropriate to use a particular ICT technique for a specific purpose, and when they plan what routines, techniques, and processes are to be used. For concepts, you'll be looking at an example such as including the basic terminology that enables children to communicate effectively and to understand what is required of them. A technique or strategies for you to use here would be to focus on the concepts behind the ICT techniques and skills. Whole class teaching can be used to discuss examples and non-examples, both with and without ICT, in order to highlight the important features of the concept. You will also need to challenge their naive ideas about handling ICT tools and techniques, both in whole class teaching, where appropriate, and when monitoring their individual work. For example, when students use spaces to spread out text on a line or a page, you could show the effect of adding extra text so that the spaces move to a different position in the line. And then finally, encourage the children to reflect on their ICT experiences, as this is a very important part of this process. In relation to higher order thinking skills, you will need to manage the planning, evaluation, and monitoring of children's work, while involving the children in the process through whole class teaching. You can ask strategic and evaluative questions, and encouraging children to ask each other the same questions. As a final note, in relation to teaching ICT techniques, when using technology in early childhood education, it is important to use a range of ways of supporting children. So some final successful strategies that you could use when focusing on ICT techniques include: demonstrate with descriptive or explanatory commentary. This is mainly used when introducing ideas to a group or a class. Monitored instruction. This is when you give instructions step by step and then check that the child is following. Monitored repetition. Here the child tries to repeat an ICT technique with you filling in what the child can't do. In this situation, the child tries to work out the steps and you provide the questions or prompts to help them recognize relevant cues, concepts and familiar ICT techniques, the child tries to repeat the ICT techniques, with you providing the questions or prompts to help the child recognize the relevant cues and concepts. And finally, quick fix is when you just simply jump in to quickly solve the problem without any explanation to enable the child to focus on the intended objectives. So those are the ways that you can successfully teach technology in your early learning environment today.